Hello, everyone. My name is Adam Williams, and you are listening to another episode of Retail Redeveloped. Now, we are going to talk about retail on a global scale today. I'm very excited to be joined by one Karl Haller. He is the global lead for IBM's Consumer Center of Competency. Got 25 years of experience. He currently leads IBM's industry focus on AI for fashion and retail transformation. Has deep experience leading multiple disciplines, including strategy, business transformation, marketing, CRM, insights and analytics, and a lot of other things. Now, one thing that I've learned, I've got some close friends that work for IBM, and what I've learned is that when you ask somebody from IBM what they do for a living, it's a lot like asking somebody at Bank of America. You just have to sit down and relax for a minute while they tell you exactly what they do. So, Karl, if you don't mind, I'm going to get comfortable. Tell me exactly what you do at IBM, why people should care about it, and tell me a little bit about the why behind you getting to sit in the seat that you're in now.
Sure, Adam. Thank you. So first, thanks very much for having me on. Happy to share a little bit about what we're seeing with consumers, with retailers and consumer brands, and a little bit about what we, IBM, are doing for and with our clients. So my role at IBM, as you described it correctly, everyone's role is multifaceted. So my primary role and my team's primary role is working with our clients anywhere in the world on business transformation. Generally, that is at the intersection of an advanced capability or an advanced technology, something like AI, something like blockchain, something like mobile, that you would consider next generation, with a particular business problem, whether that's with customer experience and engagement, whether that's with supply chain, whether that's with enterprise operations. I've got people on my team who focus in each of those areas.
Now, obviously, the impetus behind us discussing all things retail today is this new report that you guys just released. Would you do me a favor and explain to everyone what the report was and why you guys decided it was important to put it together and get it in front of your clients?
Sure. So we study the consumer quite often at IBM, and that's another piece of one of my roles is working with our Institute for Business Value on all of our studies, or most of our studies, certainly, that relate to the retail and consumer products industries. So last year, we did a sizable study of 29,000, or sorry, just about 20,000 consumers, 28 countries around the world, where we really were trying to understand what makes people tick and what's changing in how and why they buy. We launched that at the National Retail Federation this past January, and then 2 months later, we had to go right back out and relook at consumers again, because by then we were in the midst of COVID. And since then, we have been doing consumer pulse studies roughly every month. The most recent one hit in June, which is, I believe, the one that you're referencing. And really one of the things we've found, and the way I always phrase it is kind of the U.S. consumer is concerned, is cautious, and in June was tired of being cooped up. We've got a lot of concern about consumers' personal economies, their own finances. 2/3 of consumers are concerned about a second COVID wave. A similar amount, over 60%, think we'll have more pandemics in the future. And 40% are concerned about job security, and 20% of consumers have been impacted directly or indirectly through COVID. So there's a lot of concern there. There's also a lot of caution about how and where consumers are going to re-engage, and then that brings them to caution about whether or not themselves, a consumer individually, or a member of their family will become infected, become seriously ill, or potentially pass away. And so we're seeing consumers really think about what behaviors they are resuming doing. And, we're seeing in two patterns, we're seeing two patterns emerge. One is outdoor activities and activities with small groups in single digits or double digits of people, going to parks, going to restaurants and bars, frankly, going back to shopping malls, beauty salons, et cetera. We see that 35 to 50% of people, depends on the activity, have already done this activity or plan to do this activity in the next month. And then there's a small minority, less than 30%, are like, hang on, I'm not doing this anytime soon. Really, they don't see themselves doing it before next year. On the flip side, we see that there are a set of what consumers perceive as riskier activities or large group activities. Now, keep in mind, this survey was done in the beginning to middle of June, so we don't yet know how the last 2 weeks, as caseloads have increased dramatically, are going to play out on consumers. But consumers were very cautious about what they perceived to be riskier activities: amusement parks, museums, sporting events, movies, live theater. Here we've got almost half thinking that they're going to wait to 2021 before doing this again. And on the flip side, we've got less than 20% of consumers doing these activities in the next month or having done them already. So we're really seeing a bifurcation in terms of how and where consumers are starting to re-engage. I think if I project
do you
forward...
think that's age-based?
We haven't seen it as much on age. We have seen, some geographic patterns. The states that were harder hit earlier are kind of managing their activities more than states that were not as hard hit earlier. You do see some in age, and certainly from what we've actually seen, it almost doesn't matter what consumers have said they're going to do. We certainly have seen a lot of younger consumers engaging in what they may see as not risky activities, but maybe what the rest of us would see as risky activities.
Interesting. Yeah, we seem to. Now, I'm calling from Charlotte, North Carolina, so we did not have a huge caseload in the beginning. Now North Carolina is ticking up, but still nothing compared to Texas, Florida, the original
right.
kind of hotbeds of San Fran and Seattle and Manhattan and those places. So it seems to be fairly, like there's an area called South End in Charlotte, which is young millennial central, right? Super hot restaurants, bars, lots of mid-rise apartments, lots of density. And you go there on the weekends and there's people hanging out, and it's not people in their 50s, it's people in their 20s and 30s. And it's been very interesting to see. I guess those people feel like they're, maybe not less at risk, but that they're probably not going to, almost certainly not going to die from it, and quite possibly won't even know they had it, or there's all sorts of wild variations in this darn thing. So I would think that age would play a big factor, maybe not so much as when they think they're going to go to a sold-out concert and sit in the pit, surrounded by 1,000 people, but just the general getting out and about and not being a recluse.
Yeah, and I think that gets to that point I was making about people being tired of being cooped up, and especially among younger generations who are living on their own, either young singles or early household formation. They're probably not living in a 3,000-4,000 square foot house with every convenience in it. So a lot, and I'm in New York City, so we're definitely not used to 3,000 or 4,000 square feet. Sometimes you feel like you have to get out because the walls start closing in, and I think that tired of being cooped up has driven, frankly, a lot of what we've seen in this country over the past month. A lot of the different behaviors that we weren't seeing in April or May. really starting in, I'd say, right around Memorial Day and really through the July 4th holiday weekend, we saw a lot of people feeling that need to get out, and they made their own decision about what was risky and what wasn't risky.
What we've seen down here, and I'm almost certain that it's a national phenomenon, the numbers of people on bicycles and just those types of physical activity that you don't need to be right up on top of someone to do has gone through the roof in the Southeast. We're blessed with good weather. It's hot as blazes right now, but typically good weather. And you can't find a bicycle for sale. You can't get a bicycle worked on. It has to be like Christmas 24/7 right now if you're in the bicycle business. And I'm sure that there's other outdoor healthy activities that are seeing similar booms in much the same way that the home improvement and grocery sectors are really feeling some life.
Yeah, we've seen similar things. Pretty much everything related to fitness, especially as gyms closed. And it depends on the state, county, and city whether or not gyms are back open. But on one hand, you've got a whole bunch of people that relied on the gym for their equipment that now had to get their equipment, the actual fitness enthusiasts. And then, frankly, for a couple of months, going out and getting some personal exercise was just about the only thing you could do. And for those of us who are lucky enough to have kept working from home, sometimes you just need you need that get up and move around just to kind of recharge even in the middle of the day, if not for quote unquote formal exercise.
Right.
So we saw the same things in the parks here, and I've seen we've seen things around exercise equipment. I hear things that Peloton has been having a sales surge. We just saw that Lululemon kind of doubled down on this with their Mirror acquisition, which I thought was really smart for a lot of reasons. But I think it'll be interesting to see how it sticks. How long will it be that we'll be focused on outdoor activities versus reverting back? Probably also helps that there's no sports on TV. So we've taken a whole bunch of things that people used to do that involved sitting, and actually we've made people get up and move around. It's not a bad thing.
No, definitely not a bad thing. Although I can tell you that racing, F1 and IndyCar came back online this weekend, and I was thrilled to have some kind of sports to watch. But Karl, talk to me about something. It doesn't have to be one thing in particular. It could be a certain sect. It could be whatever. I'll let you answer it. But what has surprised you over the course of this? Something that you thought you kind of had nailed, and then some of these 20,000 people in 28 different countries. There was a trend that you didn't think about on the front end. Talk to me about some things that surprised you.
Sure. Yeah, there were two things that came out of the study last year that were actually three big things that came out of the study last year that are now further impacted with COVID. So one is we saw a pretty significant group of consumers shopping in what we call micro moments, which is essentially this idea that you're doing something else, and in the middle of doing that other thing, you go shop. And that can be, sitting in a stoplight in your car. That can be riding an elevator. It can be sitting in a boring meeting. It can be talking to someone. Frankly, it can be shopping. And this idea of being able to dart in and out of a shopping experience, whether that's, actually on a website, but more commonly on a phone, whether you're, speaking into something, chatting with someone, or jumping on a site or an app, we saw that 35% of consumers were doing that regularly. That's around the world across pretty much all income groups. 70% say they've done it. 35% were doing it at least monthly. That's something now that we've had 3 months of training where digitally is about the only way you can shop. I think we will probably see it when we talk to consumers later this year again. We'll probably see an increase of that. And this idea of micro-moment shopping is here to stay. A second big theme of the study was around the emergence of what we will call what we call the purpose-driven consumer, which is someone choosing brands and stores based on how well that brand or that retailer fits with their own personal values. We've always known that there are people who do that, and then there are plenty of people who choose brands and stores based on things like price, selection, convenience, the more tangible features of retail. What we found was that the number of consumers who were purpose-driven, again, this is 19,000 people, 28 countries around the world, was just as big as the number of people who are values-driven. It was 40% of consumers were purpose-driven, 41% of consumers were values-driven. And that was true across age groups. It was true across almost all income segments. Once you hit middle income, the percentages were pretty similar. That we were surprised and frankly impressed that consumers are putting a different weight on how they choose brands and stores and a different level of priority. We think both of those will continue, if not accelerate, in COVID. The third theme was around sustainability. And this was another one that we were pleasantly surprised with the importance of sustainability. So we had over half of consumers saying that sustainability is very important to them. And then we had approximately a third of consumers saying they were willing to pay more for a brand or a retailer that demonstrates their sustainability through actions. And we actually found that the amount, we asked them, how much more would you be willing to pay? And the average of those who were willing to pay more was about 35% more. So it shows that there is an opportunity for consumers to shift to sustainability, at cost or even at a slight premium. This is one that we're not sure how it's going to shake out. We think it's still important, but it may take a back seat around, after things like personal safety and personal economy. If it gets to the point where if you've been laid off, if you don't have steady income, you might not choose to pay more even if you want to because you can't. But I think we would be encouraged that as we progress forward to whatever the next normal looks like, there is a willingness to rethink sustainability. And frankly, we think there's a compelling business case among brands and retailers to be sustainable, and they really just need to know that consumers will go with them on that journey. And so we think the supply side is now going to start to drive that sustainability agenda.
So let me ask you this. So in life, this isn't a universal rule, but what people say and what people do are often two very different things. So the first question, I've got a couple of questions on that, and that's fascinating data. One, on the micro shopping moments, are they actually buying, or is this just a further kind of entrenchment of this omni-channel idea where people want to just be able to interact with a brand or with a store or with a type of product that they like at any time in a seamless fashion? Is there any way to know, are these people actually buying things, or are we just hardwired where with massive ADHD now where we can't just sit at a stoplight for 30 seconds and think about the weather? Are people buying, or are they just like fidgeting?
So I think
how can we figure that out?
Yeah. So we only asked about shopping, first of all, because I think it's an easier thing for consumers to get a handle on.
Right.
And when we talk to our clients, and this is one of those things that's definitely accelerated as we've progressed through COVID, one of the new shopping patterns that we see emerging is, digital customer engagement will become the norm. For some, I would say it already is. For some consumers and for some consumers in certain product categories, it is. And for others, if I think about grocery, digital engagement has not been the norm so far in grocery, but I think it's going to become a lot more common. One of the things in our one of our COVID pulse updates that we've seen is that we're now sitting at approximately 65% of consumers who are grocery shopping in what I would call the traditional manner, where you go to a store, you select the goods yourself, you check out, and you take them home. That's the traditional manner of grocery shopping. A couple of years ago, that was probably 95%, 98% of all groceries in the U.S. were bought that way. Now that's 65% say that's the primary way they shop. 35% are shopping in other ways. It could be, what we'll call traditional e-com, where you shop online and you have it delivered to your home. But it could also be a click and collect or curbside model. It could be using a kiosk in a store or using an app in a store to extend the assortment and get something delivered. It could be a direct drop ship replenishment, where you've got something, you've got paper towels or toilet paper or milk on some sort of a replenishment cycle and some sort of a subscription model. So that digital customer engagement is becoming more and more important. With the digital customer engagement, I think we're going to see spending, the actual shopping and buying, splintering across more stores, because now, again, I'll use grocery as an example. If you shop at a certain grocer, they probably get 70-some% of your weekly budget, and then you fill in the other, 20-some%. But now if it's digital, you don't actually have the hassle of going to 3 different places. So maybe you like the produce at one place, you like the fish at another place, but there's a third place that gives you the best deals on all your packaged goods. So now you might split your basket equally in 3 ways, and because you're doing either curbside or delivery, you can do all of that in less time than it took you to go to the one store. So we're going to see a lot of spending splintering across stores, and we're going to see an increased unbundling of how shopping, buying, and fulfillment happen. So those are things that they were always out there in the fringes, but are really accelerating, largely due to COVID. I've seen different.
You just hit on something. I'm blessed to be able to talk to people like you that are on the cutting edge every single week. And the thing I keep hearing over, and I'm talking like almost every single call that I have now, is acceleration. Like we have seen, and I'd love to hear your take on this, we've seen a 3 to 5 year acceleration of what was already insanely fast change. So the fact that we're getting a 3 to 5 year, almost overnight or quarterly acceleration in these online trends has everybody trying to scratch their heads and figure things out.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's, it all depends on who you ask and what data you look at. But yes, we're seeing, moving from, something that was going to happen in 3 years to it happening in 3 weeks. I've heard the same thing about, 5 years and 5 weeks. It was a real explosion, again, especially in the grocery space, where when people retrenched, they quickly looked to buy those things that were most essential to them in the short term, in the near term. And so that's where you started to see that quick explosion. We think, I think that what's even broader and probably more important in that trend is to stop thinking about, what percentage of my sales are e-commerce. because, again, that's just measuring where the transaction takes place. And I get that, yes, you have to measure where the transaction takes place because that's where the money changes hands and that's what drives sales. But that's just one piece of the shopping equation or the purchase journey. And frankly, a small piece, any given transaction is such a small piece of the overall, lifetime customer engagement life cycle or, lifetime value of a customer with a brand or with a retailer. And we've been doing ourselves a disservice by focusing on measuring, what percentage of my sales are stores and what percentage of my sales are e-com. Consumers don't care. They don't care where you ring that. And it's been causing a lot of bad behaviors, not necessarily bad behaviors, but it's been slowing the pace of change that retailers and brands have needed to do because their own metrics are getting in the way.
So you're talking to a true blue brick and mortar retail guy, right? That's my day-to-day business is helping brands grow their physical footprint and helping institutional landlords understand how to make their projects interesting and cool and amenitized, right? So this is all happening to me real time. Talk for a moment on kind of a global scale, or maybe not global, maybe national scale, on what you think this means for brick and mortar retail moving forward. And I'm not talking about moving forward in 60 days, because anybody that tells you they know what's going to happen in brick and mortar retail in the next 60 days or 120 days is trying to sell you something, I think. I mean, I think we're in the middle innings of this thing, and we're all trying to figure it out, even if you talk to 20,000 other people that really don't know any more than I do. But talk to me about what you think moving forward this means for brick and mortar retail.
Sure. So I will talk about the 60 days, and I'm from IBM, so I do have something to sell. But the
I told you already, I'm a shareholder. I'm buying, baby.
It's good. One of the things, it's a really interesting question. One of the things that some of our cross-industry big thinkers at IBM tossed out to all of our industry leadership is, what's something that's going to be on our clients' minds 90 days from now, or it was September when they asked, 90 days from now that they're not thinking about yet. And I started pondering through that, and one of the big ones for me was there's going to be a great reckoning about which stores they should have open and which stores they shouldn't have open. Because whether, frankly, you've been, non-essential retail and you've been closed, you were closed for, half of March, all of April, some to all of May, or whether you were an essential retailer and you've been open, but you've been experiencing a lot of additional costs, we're now, pretty much everything is reopened. And so, at some point, rents are starting to be repaid. And traffic, from what we're seeing, is gradually coming back, looks really good month on month, but it doesn't look so hot year on year. As you well know, the retail business model is quite precarious. I don't know a lot of retailers who can run, a good store-level, four-wall contribution model when traffic declines 5% or 10%. And we're talking about, we're seeing people getting back at, maybe they're at 85%. Some are talking about at 90% of what they were running a year before. I think we've got a little bit of pent-up demand, but I think as we progress through kind of the dog days of summer and we start to get into Labor Day, we're going to see a lot of people looking at what the trend lines are in retail stores and saying, oh, we got to close a bunch of these. And that's going to have a ripple effect, throughout the whole company. Because, and it goes beyond just, is that store generating four-wall or not? It's really more of the approach that we challenge our clients to take is, rather than justifying the store based on the fact that you've always had the store there, let's start and rethink about it in a zero-based budget kind of way. Actually, let's assume we have no stores. Where should we have them, of what types, and for what purpose? And then over time, let's rethink what that model actually looks like. One, we have to expand what it means to have a store. Does it have inventory? Does it not have inventory? Is it a fulfillment point? Is it just about the experience? More of a kind of a bonobos-like showroom model? Is it really just a big kiosk and it's fully automated and I'm just going in and kind of punching in buttons and then a robot's bringing things to me so I can take them home? Is it a drive-through location? Or is it a kind of a classic big store that's maybe doing a bunch of other things, on the side, running deliveries, running curbside, all that stuff to make the model work? But I think, we're going to see, I don't think it's going to take so long to get to that reckoning of what to do about stores. I think that's going to happen in a couple of waves. One will happen at the end of summer, and then another one for those who make it through the end of summer, they're going to have another one post-holiday.
So I've got a theory that I'd love to hear your take on, and completely agree with you on the reckoning. I mean, I think that it's been coming for a long time. I get the question a lot, like, have you been surprised by closings in your area? Because obviously I know the landscape pretty well. I was like, no, not really yet. A lot of people that aren't reopening, I would have said, yeah, that makes perfect sense. They probably weren't crushing it before, not going to make it out of this now. Makes perfect sense. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Retail, to me, on a large scale, seems to be, and this is going back to kind of Walmart versus Kmart, if you really think about it now, that Amazon versus all comers, retail is turning more and more and more into a logistics game and less, and who has the shiniest mousetrap. And I think that is also going to be accelerated with this last mile delivery, with just everybody expecting things to show up, 5 seconds after you order them. I think that is going to become massively important, and I'd love to hear your take on it. I mean, you can see it in grocery now. I could very much see smaller footprints, very, very pretty footprints of a grocer, and all of the magic is happening out in a industrial building that they're paying, $7 a foot in rent for, as opposed to, $37 a foot in rent. So I'd love to hear your take on that.
Yeah, I think it's a very good theory. I've had a similar theory, which is kind of the if you break down what a retailer does, they buy things for X and they sell them for X plus Y. That's kind of just the way that model works. Over time, the ability to drive economic value with that business model has been being reduced. And I think we're getting close to the idea that buying something for one price and selling it for another price is not going to drive a substantial amount of profit. You can break even doing that. And it's becoming more of that standard model is becoming more of a break-even model. So you have to look and say, okay, so what else are you doing to add value? For some retailers, it's about their own brand, and they add value by, better design. And that can be that's in apparel, that can be in home, that can be in household goods. Frankly, that can be in food and packaged goods as well. Anything aspirational, right.
Environment. Yeah.
You can also add value by charging membership fees to give a basket of services. So Costco has been doing this forever. Costco has been running roughly a break-even model on the retail business, and the vast majority of their operating profit has been generated through membership fees. Again, it depends on the year, but that's been going back 20-some years. You could argue that for a while that's what was happening with Amazon Prime. It was a membership fee, not dissimilar to Costco, that drove cash and some level of profitability and allowed them to run the core retail business for many years at break even or even a loss. Now you start to look and you say, oh, well, what does that mean? Well, now I can think about what are my other business models that I can run off the back of that. This is where Amazon, I think, has been, years ahead of many other retailers in trying to think about how do they take a break-even business and generate a bunch of new revenue streams around it. The biggest one they did was with AWS. Then certainly they've also loaded more things into Prime, and they've got all of the video production capabilities and studios. They also have the third largest ad platform. Walmart has replicated a lot of that to a great degree. They have certainly an ad platform business. They're running not really an AWS style business, but they're looking at other platform businesses that they can develop, that they can use to sell to others. H&M in apparel. This was one of those announcements that was really intelligent and then got lost in the shuffle of COVID. Back in February, they announced they were going to make every aspect of their product development, design, and supply chain available to other brands. So they were looking at their ability to, design, develop, source, make, and ship goods as something that they could sell to other brands. So now if you just have a design idea, you could run that through H&M's network and get it produced probably at a good price, probably at scale that can go anywhere. So I think that's one of those things retailers really need to think about. What do they do better than others that they can actually monetize?
I think we're in such a crazy changing landscape. I can't wait to see the next brand that climbs on Walmart or Amazon's back and scales in 2 years what it would have taken them 10 or 12 years to do just a few short years ago. Let me do this, Karl. You've already been unbelievably gracious with your time, and I want to be respectful of that, but I have a few kind of quick knee-jerk questions from the report that I want to hit you with. But before I do that, would you tell everybody where they can interact with you, where they can find copies of the report, how they can learn more about what IBM is doing in this space, and just generally how they can learn more about what you guys are doing?
Sure. Well, not surprisingly, our website is ibm.com. Right on the front page of that site, I haven't checked it today, but as of yesterday, it was all focused on the big themes of our COVID responses. Within that, you can drill into industries, and you can also drill into the Institute for Business Value. If you do a quick search on your favorite search engine for IBM IBV, that'll take you right to the Institute for Business Value site. And from there, you can look at the studies. If anyone wants to connect with me directly, LinkedIn is the best way. I'm LinkedIn.com, and it's Karl Haller within LinkedIn, KarlHaller. So people can ping me right through LinkedIn.
Awesome, Karl. All right, you ready for some quick knee-jerk responses? All right, what has been the most innovative e-commerce advancements you've seen since the start of COVID?
The ability to spin up, curbside and home delivery within, 2-3 weeks. And we've seen a handful of retailers ramp that up in a big accelerated way.
Yeah, we've seen the same thing locally. The latest report indicates that 1 in 4 respondents indicated that they are shopping more at locally owned stores and restaurants. Do you see that as a trend that is more of a knee-jerk to seeing, the deli that you always like to go to, it's been shut down and you just want to help that guy out? Or do you think that is a paradigm shift that will, continue after COVID is over?
I think it's too early to tell, like from the data. I do think you've got consumers who want to support their local merchants, especially when they see them having a risk of going under. And also you have the safety and security of staying local and not having to go to a big mall or a big store. On the flip side, I see that larger stores and national brands have a more systemic way of ensuring cleanliness and safety of their store locations. And for some consumers, they may feel more security in that than the local merchant who they know and trust, but maybe don't know how and where things have been cleaned.
Understood. Most crucial thing for brands to do in order to adapt to this evolving retail landscape. We talked about it earlier. It's 5 years and 5 weeks. If you could pick one most crucial thing for brands to do to adapt, what would it be?
Spend some time rethinking and refinding what makes you essential. The government has decided, the U.S. government and the state and local governments spent time deciding what's essential and what's not essential back in March, and that's continuing in some areas to this day. But as everything is open, consumers are going to decide, and they're going to decide with their wallets, and the effect will be, it'll be slower than the government saying you're shut down the next day, but the result will be the same. So spend the time and rethink what makes you essential to your target customers and build your business around that.
That's a great quote, Karl. I like that quote quite a bit. Now, this study found that 1 in 5 urban residents are looking to relocate away from dense urban areas. Do you think this migration boosting, or do you see this migration boosting retail and redevelopment in smaller suburban markets, or do you think this is kind of a blip in the radar and everybody's going to be flowing back into Manhattan in 6 months? Talk to me about what you think this is going to translate to in the future.
So as a Manhattanite who has spent more than a few hours on Zillow and Trulia over the last few months, I'm not sure what's going to happen. I am a big believer in cities in general, and I think at some point, whether it's through vaccine or immunity, we will get back to the point where meetings face-to-face will happen, where we're going back into offices, where we're not concerned about this pandemic, but we will also have a heightened sense and awareness of all of the other things that are coming online. So the new H1N1 strain that we've probably all heard about in the last 2 weeks, yet if there hadn't been COVID, we wouldn't have heard about it at all until it hit our neighborhood. I think we'll have a heightened sense of awareness to that. I think, and this is probably not the most optimistic scenario, I think what will happen is the big city retail will crater out before, will crater and will drop out before small suburban retail will find enough of its footing and the right business model to take its place. I think more of that will go to online, to go to, or at least a digital customer engagement, whether that's digital over Zoom or digital over a website, and we'll figure out over time how to make in-person, face-to-face work in places that don't have a lot of urban density.
I have a lot of friends in the apartment business, and I wonder very much if you are a millennial, call them 28 years old, you're making, decent money. Maybe you've got a girlfriend or a boyfriend or a whatever friend, and you've been spending big money to live in a shiny, beautiful apartment building with an incredible gym and movie theater and all these amazing communal things to do, and you haven't been able to use them and don't really want to use them. Wonder what that does for the single-family market in these, call it secondary and tertiary cities. Like take Manhattan, yep. Chicago, Boston, San Fran out of the mix because they're just their own animals. But that next level, I wonder if you're going to see this exodus. I think exodus is probably strong, but a shift in consumer behavior from, I'm willing to pay the big money, and I'm willing to live elbow to elbow. So you know what? 5-minute drive isn't too bad. I'm going to go, or
right.
a 10-minute drive or 15-minute drive isn't too bad. I'm extremely curious to see how that plays out.
Yeah, me too. And frankly, it depends on what you do as well. If you're in if you're working, say, in a retail store, in a distribution center, in a manufacturing facility, on a farm, somewhere where you have the physicality actually matters to the work. But if you're somewhere where you're at a desk, you've probably got certainly maybe a year till you're required to get back to that desk. And that's definitely gonna drive some people to rethink how and where they live, which will then impact a lot of their shopping behavior, even if it's just like what grocery store you go to. We're going to see a lot of those shifts happen.
All right, last question, Karl. You got to go out with a bang here. You ready? So with everybody working remotely, somebody said something to me the other day that they have their favorite Zoom shirt that they throw on, which implies that they're have peanut butter stains on their T-shirts the other 23 hours out of the day. Do you think that is something that will stick around? Like, I can tell you, I went from wearing a sports coat and maybe a nice pair of jeans or maybe a nice pair of khakis or something like that to shorts and maybe a polo and sneakers being my normal get up. Do you think Lululemon and other athleisures are just going to take over the entire planet? Or do you think that apparel will kind of normalize and people will go back to their old habits?
So I think on one hand, I think we are in for a protracted down cycle in apparel. It's not been, a year ago, apparel was not a strong business to be in. 2 years ago, apparel was not a strong business to be in. And there were a lot of, whether it's department stores or mall-based apparel stores that were struggling before COVID. COVID is really accelerating kind of some of the retail Darwinism that takes place, every 5 to 10 years, maybe every 10 to 15 years in this industry. I do think that we will see a further shift toward casualization in the workplace. I've got my Zoom shirts as well, and I've got my rack of Brooks Brothers suits and ties sitting in my closet. And I don't know when I'm going to wear the rack of suits and ties right now. I think you do see, though, that apparel and fashion is that's one of the ways consumers express who they are and what their personality is. And I think what we haven't done is figured out exactly how to express that in an era when our connections are all in a laptop screen or a desktop screen. But I think that will come, and maybe it means that we won't have as many people who are sock guys, because that's been a big trend, and maybe we'll see more people who are earring guys. I don't know exactly what that's going to be, but you in with that Zoom shirt, you see people talking about scarves. You see a lot of people talking about tops and accessorization on the upper half. You're not seeing really a lot of talk about, fashion and accessorization on the bottom half. So I think personal expression is kind of innate to who we are. Whether you're wearing a hoodie or whether you're wearing a suit, that still says something about you. And in line with casualization, I think consumers will still find a way to express their personality through, fashion and accessory items that they wear.
Well said, Karl. You have been extremely gracious with your time. Thank you so much for joining me today on Retail Redeveloped. My name is Adam Williams.